The hum of computers echoed in the cold, metallic command room. Major Alex Bonner, a battle-hardened military officer, stared at the large screen in front of him. His hands were steady, but inside, a storm was brewing. A transmission from the Galactic Council had just been intercepted, and it was nothing short of horrifying. The images on the screen flickered to life, showing a cold, sterile room filled with human children. Too many to count. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with fear and pain. They were shackled, restrained to machines that looked like twisted medical devices, connected to monitors that blinked with ominous, lifeless lights. The children, no older than 5 or 6, were writhing in agony, their bodies convulsing as the machines beeped with cruel indifference. The sound of their cries, high-pitched and broken, filled the room like a sharp, cruel melody. Major Bonner's stomach churned as he watched the footage. His eyes locked onto one girl, no more than 5, her face smeared with tears as she desperately reached out with trembling hands. He clenched his jaw, and his fist tightened so hard that his knuckles turned white. The images on the screen were almost too much to bear. This was not just war, it was torture. These children had been taken from a peaceful colony on a distant planet, kidnapped by the Galactic Council, who viewed humans as nothing more than a nuisance. Major Bonner had seen his fair share of violence, but this was something else. Something deeper, something unforgivable. He hit the desk with his fist, his face darkening with rage. "They will pay for this," he whispered under his breath. His voice was low, but the fire in it could have lit the entire room. The transmission continued to play, showing the scientists of the Galactic Council observing the children with detached interest. They didn't care about the pain they were causing. To them, the children were nothing more than subjects for their experiments. The door to the command room opened with a soft hiss, but Major Bonner didn't turn. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, the blood in his veins heating with each passing second. "Major." The voice came from behind him, sharp and clear. It was Colonel Rachel Stone, his second in command, and the woman who had seen too many battles herself. She had lost her sister to the Council's raids. Her hatred for them was personal. "We have a situation," Rachel continued, walking to the side of the desk. She glanced at the screen, her eyes briefly flickering with sorrow before hardening into anger. "The Council ships are entering human space. A full-scale invasion is imminent." Major Bonner didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his thoughts. There was no time to waste on emotions, no time for hesitation. The children needed them, and the Council needed to pay. His hand slammed down onto the desk, and his eyes locked onto Rachel's with an intensity that could burn through steel. "Get the team together," he said, his voice low but filled with authority. "We move in 24 hours. Prepare for the most dangerous mission we've ever taken on." His eyes turned back to the screen, and his hands tightened into fists once again. "They think they can break us. They think they can do whatever they want. Let's show them how wrong they are." Outside the command room, a battle was about to begin. Galactic Council warships, sleek and deadly, were already crossing into human space. They had no idea what they were walking into. They had no idea that they had just awoken the fury of humanity. As Major Bonner turned away from the screen, the room erupted into action. Officers scrambled to their stations, issuing orders and communicating with other military divisions. But Bonner barely noticed. He was already lost in thought, piecing together their next move. The task was monumental. Find the children, rescue them, and then destroy the Galactic Council's forces. It would be a mission like no other, one that would define the future of humanity. The stakes had never been higher. The next few hours were a blur of frantic preparations. Bonner's team, a group of highly skilled soldiers, was summoned to meet him in the briefing room. Each of them had their own reasons for being there, but all shared one common goal: vengeance. Every soldier had a personal reason to fight, a deep well of anger and sorrow that fueled their every move. Sergeant Rachel Stone was the first to arrive. She walked in with a grim expression, her face set in stone. She had been the one to convince Bonner that they couldn't sit back any longer. The children's suffering had broken something inside her, and now she was driven by a need for retribution. Jackson, the team's tech expert, followed closely behind. He was the quiet one, always buried in his work, always tinkering with gadgets and machines. Today, his work would save lives. His latest invention, cloaking devices that would allow the fleet to travel undetected, was going to play a crucial role in the mission. Alexei, the combat specialist, came in next. He was young, but fierce, and his heart burned with the same desire for vengeance as everyone else. His younger brother had been one of the children taken by the Council. Alexei had tried to get him back once before, but it had been a failed mission. Now he was ready to make sure the Council would never harm anyone again. The rest of the team soon followed, each of them focused and ready for whatever would come next. They knew the odds. They knew that humanity was not as technologically advanced as the Council, but they also knew that they had something the Council didn't: heart. With only 24 hours to prepare, the team began to strategize. Jackson worked tirelessly on the cloaking devices and drones that would give them the element of surprise. Rachel and Alexei went over the battle plans, studying the Council's known tactics and fortresses. Meanwhile, Bonner paced back and forth, his mind racing through possible scenarios. He couldn't afford to make a single mistake. The hours flew by, and before they knew it, they were standing in the hangar, ready to launch. The team was dressed in combat gear, their faces grim but determined. The cloaking devices were activated, and the warships prepared to leave Earth's orbit. They were heading straight for the heart of the Galactic Council's empire. The mission would be dangerous, one of the most dangerous humanity had ever undertaken. But there was no turning back. Major Bonner stood at the front of the hangar, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars shimmered like 1,000 promises, but he knew that those stars hid a darkness, one that had just captured the hearts of countless innocent children. The countdown had begun. Humanity was about to strike back. The humans were the underdogs. They were outgunned and outmanned. But they had something the Council didn't: the will to fight. And that would make all the difference. As the warships powered up, ready to make the jump to faster-than-light speed, Major Bonner whispered to himself, "We will make them regret this. We will make them wish they had never touched Earth." And with that, the battle for humanity's survival began. The hum of engines filled the hangar as the elite team assembled, each soldier wearing a face that told stories of loss and pain. Major Alex Bonner stood at the front, his eyes scanning the faces of the people who had volunteered for what was surely a suicide mission. This wasn't just a mission of war, it was personal. The Galactic Council had crossed a line that could never be forgiven. Today, they would pay for their sins. Major Bonner's second-in-command, Sergeant Rachel Stone, stood at the far end of the hangar, checking her weapons with mechanical precision. Her eyes were cold, betraying nothing of the pain she carried deep within her. Rachel had been a top soldier in the fleet, but it wasn't her skill that had made her the perfect candidate for this mission. It was her anger. Rachel's sister had been one of the countless civilians who had perished in one of the Council's raids. The Council had destroyed entire colonies, killed thousands of innocent humans. Rachel had watched her sister die, her face twisted in agony as she was ripped away by Council forces. The pain of that moment, the memory of her sister's screams, had driven Rachel to become a ruthless, efficient force. There was nothing in this universe that would stop her now. She was a weapon, and this mission was her chance for justice. "Rachel," Bonner's voice broke through her thoughts. She glanced up, her expression unreadable. "You're ready?" Bonner asked. Rachel didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tightened around the gun she was holding, the same one she'd used during that fateful raid. After a long moment, she gave a single nod. "Let's finish this." Next to Rachel stood Jackson, the tech expert who had been instrumental in developing the technology that would give them a fighting chance against the Council. Jackson was a quiet man, usually more comfortable with machines than people, but today he was fully in the zone. His hands moved quickly over a set of cloaking devices, explaining the technology to the rest of the team. The cloaking technology was the team's secret weapon, designed to make them invisible to the Council's radar systems. "Here's the deal," Jackson said, his voice calm but focused. "The cloaking devices will allow us to bypass the Council's detection systems. We'll be able to infiltrate their homeworld undetected. These AI drones I've programmed will provide us with live intel on enemy movements, and we'll use them to map out their defenses before we strike." He paused and looked up, meeting the eyes of each team member. "This tech is advanced, but not as much as the Council's. We're still underdogs. We need to use our wits and be ready for anything." The team nodded, understanding the gravity of what Jackson was saying. They were about to infiltrate one of the most heavily guarded planets in the galaxy, a place where the Council's elite forces were stationed. The odds were slim, but they didn't need luck. They had something better. They had each other, and they had the fire of revenge burning inside them. Then there was Alexei, the combat specialist. He was the youngest member of the team, but his pain was just as deep as everyone else's. His younger brother had been taken by the Galactic Council during one of their raids. Unlike Rachel's sister, Alexei's brother had been a fighter, an advocate for his people. Alexei's heart had been shattered when he saw the footage of his brother being dragged away by Council soldiers. He had trained relentlessly for this day, honing his skills in combat until they were sharper than the edge of any blade. Alexei stood beside Jackson, checking his weapons. His face was a mask of determination, but his eyes betrayed a quiet, seething rage. He was here for one reason only: to make the Council suffer, to make them regret every moment they had stolen from him and his family. His brother's face flashed in his mind, and his grip on his rifle tightened. "I won't let them get away with this," Alexei muttered to himself, his words barely audible. He didn't need to say it out loud for anyone to understand. The team was united, each of them with a personal reason to fight, to bring down the Galactic Council once and for all. The moment of quiet focus was interrupted as Major Bonner stepped forward, his commanding presence drawing everyone's attention. "It's time," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "We have 24 hours to prepare, and then we move. Our mission is simple. We find the children, we bring them home, and we destroy the Galactic Council's forces. We've trained for this moment, and now we will show the Council what happens when they go too far." The tension in the air was palpable. There were no words left to say. They knew what had to be done. The team made their way toward the warships, the weight of the mission settling heavily on their shoulders. The ships were sleek and silent, their designs optimized for stealth rather than firepower. It wasn't that they lacked weaponry, on the contrary. These ships were armed to the teeth. But the key to success was not brute force. It was deception, stealth, speed. The first warship powered up, its engines humming with power. Bonner, Rachel, Jackson, and Alexei boarded the ship along with the rest of the team. The rest of the fleet was ready, and they were all silently aware that their time had come. As the ship took off from Earth's surface, the vast expanse of space stretched out before them. Bonner stood at the front of the ship, staring out into the black abyss. The stars twinkled like distant promises, and the blackness of space seemed to mock them. They were about to face the full might of the Galactic Council, a force so powerful that they could crush entire worlds without a second thought. And yet, as the human fleet ascended, they did not waver. "This is it," Bonner said, more to himself than anyone else. His voice was low, but it carried the weight of everything that had brought them here. "This is the moment we've been waiting for." The cloaking devices activated, and the warships slowly disappeared from sight, becoming little more than whispers in the vastness of space. It was as though they had never existed, moving silently, unseen, as they journeyed toward the Council's homeworld. Each ship was cloaked, the technology making them invisible to the enemy sensors. But Bonner knew that it wouldn't be enough to simply sneak by. The team would have to fight. They would have to face everything the Council could throw at them and survive. The journey to the Council's homeworld felt like an eternity. The ships sailed through space at an impossible speed, the distance between them and their target growing smaller with each passing moment. The team knew what awaited them on the other side, the most advanced military force in the galaxy, but they also knew that they were ready. This mission would test them in ways they couldn't predict, but they were united by a singular goal. They were the underdogs, but they were driven by a rage that would carry them through the darkness. The battle was about to begin, and the humans were ready to burn the Galactic Council's world to the ground. As the fleet neared their destination, Bonner gathered the team once more. He looked each of them in the eyes, knowing that this might be the last time they were all together. But there was no fear. There was only resolve. "Ready yourselves," Bonner said. "We strike now." The warships powered forward, and the universe seemed to hold its breath as the humans approached the heart of their enemy's empire. The black void of space stretched out in front of Major Alex Bonner and his team. The warships, cloaked in advanced stealth technology, moved silently through the vastness of enemy space. Each ship was a shadow, undetected by the watchful eyes of the Galactic Council. It was a moment of eerie calm before the storm. They were so close now. The team was on the brink of something that would change the galaxy forever. As the ships glided deeper into enemy territory, Bonner's thoughts were focused on the mission ahead. The Galactic Council's homeworld lay just beyond the asteroid field, heavily guarded and protected by fleets of advanced warships. They had one shot at this, one chance to destroy the heart of the enemy's power and bring their cruel reign to an end. There was no room for mistakes. The cloaking technology had been a breakthrough. It was humanity's ace in the hole. Designed by Jackson, the team's tech expert, the cloaking devices made their ships invisible to the enemy's radar, but that didn't mean they were safe. The enemy's patrols patrolled the area relentlessly, and any slip-up could lead to detection. Bonner's eyes never left the radar screen as the ships slowly navigated through the dense asteroid field, each one carefully dodging the massive rocks floating in space. The tension was suffocating. Every ship in the fleet was on edge, knowing that one wrong move could turn them from hunters into prey. They moved like ghosts, undetected, past the patrols. It was nothing short of miraculous. For a brief moment, there was a feeling of triumph. Humanity, the underdogs, were making it into the heart of the Council's stronghold without being caught. But that feeling quickly evaporated as a warning siren blared throughout the ships. "Shit. We've been spotted." Rachel's voice cut through the tension. The ship jolted as a blast hit the side of one of their cloaked vessels. The shields flickered before they flared back to life, but the damage was done. The cloaking device had been compromised. A stray shot from an enemy drone had found its mark. "Prepare for combat," Bonner barked, his voice steady despite the chaos. The entire team scrambled to their stations, their hands flying over controls and weapon systems. The quiet of space was shattered by the roar of weapons fire. The sleek Council warships, now aware of their presence, turned to face them. Despite being outgunned and outnumbered, the humans fought with everything they had. The Council's ships were massive, their designs streamlined and alien in nature, while the human vessels were smaller and less advanced. But the humans had something the Council didn't: desperation, rage, and the will to fight for their loved ones. "Engage," Bonner shouted as he slammed his fist onto the controls. The ships fired back, their weapons glowing brightly against the black of space. The visuals were breathtaking. Futuristic weapons flashing through the void, lasers cutting through the dark like streaks of lightning. A Council warship exploded in a blaze of blue light, but more kept coming. It was a fast-paced, chaotic battle, one that seemed almost impossible. The odds were stacked against them, but the humans fought on. Jackson's cloaking device might have been compromised, but that didn't mean they were giving up. "I'm on it," he yelled as he worked furiously at his console, his fingers flying over the buttons to reset the cloaking system. His face was tense, his brow furrowed in concentration. If he didn't manage to repair it in time, their entire fleet would be exposed to the full wrath of the Council's forces. Alexei, the youngest member of the team, was in the middle of the battle, his heart racing as he fired his weapons. He knew this mission was personal for him. His younger brother had been taken by the Council, and every blast he sent into the enemy ship felt like a little piece of vengeance. He fired again, and another enemy vessel exploded, sending debris scattering across the void. The thrill of the fight surged through him, but he couldn't let his emotions take over. There was a job to be done, and he had to stay focused. But the battle was taking its toll. One of the ships, a smaller but vital part of the fleet, took a direct hit. The hull of the ship buckled under the force, and sparks flew from the exposed panels. The ship began to spin out of control. Bonner watched in horror as it drifted away from the formation. "Damn it," he muttered. "Jackson, we need that cloaking system fixed now." Jackson worked quickly, his fingers flying across the console as the ship's hull shuddered. Sweat dripped down his face as he attempted to stabilize the cloaking device, knowing full well that the fate of the entire mission rested on his shoulders. "This isn't good," Jackson muttered under his breath as he glanced at the status of the system. It was close, too close. Another shot could disable their cloaking technology completely, and they'd be sitting ducks for the enemy. Then, in a heartbeat, the tech expert managed to get the cloaking device online again. "Got it," he shouted. The fleet flickered back into invisibility just as another round of fire came close. The relief was short-lived, though. The battle raged on, and the humans had to continue moving, fighting, and dodging the enemy's superior technology. But for now, they had a temporary advantage. The cloaking devices were back online, and the fleet could continue their mission to infiltrate the heavily fortified planet. Despite their success in avoiding full exposure, the fleet wasn't out of danger. The Galactic Council was powerful, and this mission was far from over. But the team knew they had to press on. Their target was in sight, the Council's homeworld just a few jumps away, and it was more heavily defended than they had anticipated. Every moment of their journey had been filled with heart-stopping tension, and as they approached the planet, their hearts pounded in their chests. "This is it," Bonner said quietly to himself, looking out into the vast expanse of space. The planet loomed large in front of them, surrounded by an armada of ships. The Council would stop at nothing to protect their world, but the humans had no choice. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. As they entered the final stretch of their mission, the fleet stayed silent, their movements precise and calculated. They had come to do what no one else had dared to: strike at the heart of the Galactic Council and take down their empire from within. It wasn't just a mission for survival, it was a mission for justice. The human fleet was ready to face whatever came next. The time for stealth was over. They had crossed into enemy territory, and now the battle for humanity's future was about to begin. The fate of the mission and the galaxy hung in the balance. The fleet approached the Galactic Council's homeworld, and what awaited them was something humanity had never seen before: an impossibly beautiful planet, surrounded by shimmering stars and vibrant landscapes. Towering cities rose high into the sky, their sleek, futuristic designs reflecting the advanced technology of the Council. From a distance, the planet seemed to be a utopia, a place where peace and prosperity reigned. But Major Alex Bonner and his team knew better. They had seen the truth, and they had come to destroy it. As the fleet moved closer, the beauty of the planet faded into the background, replaced by the cold reality of their mission. The mission was clear: breach the Council's stronghold and rescue the children. The children they had seen in the disturbing transmission, their faces twisted in pain, their bodies broken by the Council's twisted experiments. The thought of those innocent lives, subjected to unimaginable torment, fueled their anger. The camera focused on Major Bonner's face, the man who had led them this far. His expression was calm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his determination. He had seen death before, But this was different. This wasn't just a mission. It was personal. The lives of those children weighed heavily on him. They had come all this way, traveling through dangerous space, facing down impossible odds, and now they were standing on the edge of the most dangerous part of their journey. The ships silently approached the planet's atmosphere, slipping past the planetary defenses using their cloaking technology. The moment of infiltration had arrived. As they descended toward the heart of the Council's stronghold, every member of the team knew that they were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. They had come here to rescue the children, but they would not leave until they had taken the fight to the Galactic Council. The tension grew as they approached the stronghold. The towering city stretched out before them, its shining, imposing buildings standing like sentinels guarding the truth hidden within. The fleet landed silently, and the team disembarked, their weapons ready, their bodies tense. They moved quickly through the city streets, cloaked in shadows. The silence of the beautiful city was broken only by the sound of their footsteps, echoing through the empty streets. Their destination was the central stronghold, a massive fortress nestled in the heart of the city. This was where the children were being held. This was where the Council's most sinister experiments were taking place. The closer they got, the more the weight of their mission pressed down on them. The air seemed thick with anticipation, and every corner, every shadow, felt like a potential threat. As they reached the stronghold's massive doors, the team quickly breached the entrance. Inside, the cold, clinical reality of the Council's twisted operation awaited them. The halls were sterile, devoid of any warmth. The bright fluorescent lights illuminated the long metallic corridors, casting harsh shadows on the walls. This was not a place of life. It was a place of death, of suffering, and of cruelty. The team moved through the labyrinth of halls, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew what awaited them, but they couldn't let fear take hold. The children were counting on them. The soldiers pressed on, their faces hard with determination. They had come too far to turn back now. Finally, they reached the chamber where the children were being held. The sight that greeted them was more horrifying than any of them could have imagined. The children were hooked to machines, advanced, but cold and clinical devices that drained their life force, twisted their minds, and subjected them to unspeakable pain. Their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. The soldiers' hearts sank at the sight of these innocent souls, tortured beyond belief. It was a scene from a nightmare. The soldiers struggled to control their anger as they moved to free the children from the machines. They wanted to tear the entire place apart, to make the Council pay for what they had done. But they knew they couldn't let their emotions cloud their judgment. There was a job to be done. Sergeant Rachel was among the first to reach the children. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for the faces of those she could help. And then her eyes landed on a familiar face. It was her sister, her younger sister, the one she had thought lost forever. But as Rachel moved toward her, her heart skipped a beat. Her sister's body was pale and lifeless, her face frozen in a look of pain. She had been subjected to the same experiments, her spirit broken by the Council's cruelty. Rachel fell to her knees beside her sister, her breath catching in her throat as tears welled up in her eyes. She had come here to save them, but it was too late for her sister. The grief was overwhelming, but Rachel's tears were quickly replaced by fury. She clenched her fists, the pain of loss mixing with her burning need for revenge. Her sister's death wasn't in vain. She would make the Council pay for everything they had done to her, to the children, and to humanity. The team quickly began to work, freeing the remaining children from the machines, but Rachel's mind was elsewhere. Her sister's death was a turning point for her, a moment that solidified her resolve. She would fight harder, push herself further, and give everything to make sure the Council paid for their actions. The soldiers worked quickly, trying to save as many children as they could. They were only able to free a few before alarms blared, signaling that the stronghold had been breached. The Council had discovered their presence. There was no time to waste. The team quickly regrouped, the children safely hidden as they prepared to fight their way out. As they made their way out of the stronghold, the battle began in earnest. The sounds of explosions and gunfire filled the air as the team fought their way through the enemy forces. They were outnumbered, but they fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. The stakes had never been higher. With each step, the emotional weight of the mission hung heavy on them. The loss of Rachel's sister, the pain of the children they had rescued, it all served as a reminder of the stakes they were fighting for. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for justice. They were fighting to ensure that no more innocent lives would be lost. The tension grew as they approached the stronghold. The towering city stretched out before them, its shining, imposing buildings standing like sentinels guarding the truth hidden within. The fleet landed silently, and the team disembarked, their weapons ready, their bodies tense. They moved quickly through the city streets, cloaked in shadows. The silence of the beautiful city was broken only by the sound of their footsteps, echoing through the empty streets. Their destination was the central stronghold, a massive fortress nestled in the heart of the city. This was where the children were being held. This was where the Council's most sinister experiments were taking place. The closer they got, the more the weight of their mission pressed down on them. The air seemed thick with anticipation, and every corner, every shadow, felt like a potential threat. As they reached the stronghold's massive doors, the team quickly breached the entrance. Inside, the cold, clinical reality of the Council's twisted operation awaited them. The halls were sterile, devoid of any warmth. The bright fluorescent lights illuminated the long metallic corridors, casting harsh shadows on the walls. This was not a place of life. It was a place of death, of suffering, and of cruelty. The team moved through the labyrinth of halls, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew what awaited them, but they couldn't let fear take hold. The children were counting on them. The soldiers pressed on, their faces hard with determination. They had come too far to turn back now. Finally, they reached the chamber where the children were being held. The sight that greeted them was more horrifying than any of them could have imagined. The children were hooked to machines, advanced, but cold and clinical devices that drained their life force, twisted their minds, and subjected them to unspeakable pain. Their faces were twisted in agony, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. The soldiers' hearts sank at the sight of these innocent souls, tortured beyond belief. It was a scene from a nightmare. The soldiers struggled to control their anger as they moved to free the children from the machines. They wanted to tear the entire place apart, to make the Council pay for what they had done. But they knew they couldn't let their emotions cloud their judgment. There was a job to be done. Sergeant Rachel was among the first to reach the children. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for the faces of those she could help. And then her eyes landed on a familiar face. It was her sister, her younger sister, the one she had thought lost forever. But as Rachel moved toward her, her heart skipped a beat. Her sister's body was pale and lifeless, her face frozen in a look of pain. She had been subjected to the same experiments, her spirit broken by the Council's cruelty. Rachel fell to her knees beside her sister, her breath catching in her throat as tears welled up in her eyes. She had come here to save them, but it was too late for her sister. The grief was overwhelming, but Rachel's tears were quickly replaced by fury. She clenched her fists, the pain of loss mixing with her burning need for revenge. Her sister's death wasn't in vain. She would make the Council pay for everything they had done to her, to the children, and to humanity. The team quickly began to work, freeing the remaining children from the machines, but Rachel's mind was elsewhere. Her sister's death was a turning point for her, a moment that solidified her resolve. She would fight harder, push herself further, and give everything to make sure the Council paid for their actions. The soldiers worked quickly, trying to save as many children as they could. They were only able to free a few before alarms blared, signaling that the stronghold had been breached. The Council had discovered their presence. There was no time to waste. The team quickly regrouped, the children safely hidden as they prepared to fight their way out. As they made their way out of the stronghold, the battle began in earnest. The sounds of explosions and gunfire filled the air as the team fought their way through the enemy forces. They were outnumbered, but they fought with the fury of those who had nothing left to lose. The stakes had never been higher. With each step, the emotional weight of the mission hung heavy on them. The loss of Rachel's sister, the pain of the children they had rescued, it all served as a reminder of the stakes they were fighting for. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for justice. They were fighting to ensure that no more innocent lives would be lost. As they made their way to the extraction point, Bonner's mind was racing. The mission was far from over. They had rescued the children, but there was still the larger battle to fight. They had to bring the fight to the Galactic Council, to tear down their empire and destroy the tyranny that had caused so much suffering. But for now, they had won a small victory. They had freed the children. They had given them a chance at life. And for the first time in a long while, the soldiers could take a breath. But they knew that this was just the beginning. The real fight was still ahead of them. The battle raged on, but the humans had no time to savor their victory. Just when Major Bonner's team thought they had successfully rescued the children and secured their exit from the Galactic Council's stronghold, everything changed in an instant. The Council wasn't finished yet. It had one final trick up its sleeve, one that would turn the tide of battle against the humans. The team had just reached the landing site, preparing to board their ships and escape the planet's surface, when the ground beneath them shook. The sound of heavy machinery, distant at first, grew louder with every passing second. They didn't have long to figure out what was happening. Suddenly, the skies above them were filled with blinding lights. Massive metallic shapes descended from the atmosphere, each one larger and more intimidating than the last. The Council had unleashed an army of battle robots, sleek, towering machines with deadly weapons and advanced armor. Their cold, mechanical eyes seemed to glow with malice as they touched down, surrounding the human soldiers. The team reacted instinctively. Sergeant Rachel was the first to open fire, her blaster ripping through the air as she took down the first few robots. Her anger was clear. She wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting for revenge. The rest of the team followed suit, launching an all-out assault on the machines. But it was clear that this was no ordinary fight. The robots were equipped with sophisticated weapons, advanced AI, and near-impenetrable armor. They fought with a calculated precision that made every human move seem desperate in comparison. As the battle intensified, the ground around them seemed to erupt in explosions, as if the planet itself was fighting back. The humans fought hard, using everything they had: stealth, speed, and their superior combat skills. But the sheer number of robots and their relentless assault pushed the team to the brink. Major Bonner shouted orders, trying to keep the team together, but the odds were growing slimmer by the second. In the midst of the chaos, a new enemy appeared. The skies above were suddenly filled with dozens of massive ships, each one far more advanced than anything the humans had at their disposal. These were the Council's AI-controlled warships, each one bristling with weapons and swarming with robotic drones. The sight of them was enough to send a chill down the spine of even the bravest soldier. The humans were surrounded, caught between the relentless robots on the ground and the overwhelming power of the enemy fleet in the sky. They were trapped. The only thing that stood between them and annihilation was Major Bonner's determination to fight back. He knew that if they didn't act quickly, they would be wiped out. Major Bonner's mind raced. He had one final plan, one last chance to turn the tide in their favor. He quickly made the call for a massive orbital bombardment, hoping it would be enough to take out the Council's capital and disrupt their forces. The fleet of human warships, hovering in orbit above the planet, was ready to strike. All ships, fire at will. Bonner's voice echoed over the comms. His order was sharp and clear. The human ships unleashed a barrage of missiles, lasers, and plasma strikes at the heart of the Council's capital city. The sky above the city erupted into a fiery inferno as the weapons tore through the atmosphere, creating a wall of light and destruction. The city that had once stood as a symbol of the Galactic Council's power was now being torn apart piece by piece. Tall skyscrapers crumbled into dust, massive buildings shattered under the barrage, and the once pristine streets were consumed by flames. The Council's glorious cities, which had been built to stand the test of time, were now reduced to rubble in mere moments. The ground shook with each explosion as the human fleet unleashed everything they had. From their vantage point in orbit, they could see the destruction unfold, a chaotic storm of fire and debris, as the capital fell apart under the might of human firepower. The Council's ships, still orbiting above, tried to retaliate, launching a barrage of their own at the human fleet. But the human ships were fast, and they had been prepared for this. They moved with precision, dodging the incoming fire as they continued to bombard the planet below. It wasn't just the city that was under attack. The shock waves of the bombardment were felt all across the planet's surface. The very atmosphere seemed to crackle with energy as the skies turned red with fire. The humans had managed to break the Council's hold on the planet, but it had come at a heavy cost. The battle on the surface continued, the human soldiers fighting against the relentless machines that stood between them and safety. As the orbital bombardment raged on, Major Bonner and his team fought desperately to escape the planet. They knew that every second counted. They had to get out before the Council retaliated with everything they had left. The battle for the planet was far from over, and the humans' victory, if they could call it that, was still uncertain. In the midst of the chaos, Bonner couldn't help but think about the bigger picture. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a battle for freedom. The destruction of the Council's capital wasn't just about taking down a city, it was about sending a message. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had come to the Council's doorstep, and they had struck back with a force that no one had seen coming. But even as the firestorm raged above them, Bonner knew that this was only the beginning. The Council would not take this defeat lightly. They would regroup, rebuild, and retaliate. The war was far from over. The humans had won a small victory, but the real fight for their freedom was just beginning. Major Bonner's voice cut through the chaos once more, calm and resolute. "We're not done yet," he said, his words ringing with determination. "Get to the ships. We're taking this fight to them." The team, battered but unbowed, fought their way toward the extraction point. With every step, the stakes grew higher, but so did their resolve. The battle for survival, for revenge, for the future of humanity, was far from over. The Council had struck first, but humanity was just getting started. The final chapter of this brutal conflict was approaching. Major Bonner's fleet, though victorious in many respects, was battered and nearing its breaking point. The human soldiers had given everything they had, fighting with the fierce determination that had become their hallmark. But now, they were surrounded by the overwhelming might of the Council's forces. It seemed as though this battle would be the end of the line for them. In the midst of all the chaos, Major Bonner stood at the helm of the command ship, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of the lives on his shoulders, the lives of the team, and the children they had risked everything to rescue. There was only one way to ensure their escape. He knew what he had to do. He turned to Sergeant Rachel, who stood beside him, her eyes filled with doubt. "Major, we can't just," she started, but Bonner cut her off with a firm look. "We've come too far. You get those kids out of here. I'll hold them off." His voice was resolute, unwavering. Rachel's heart sank. She knew that Bonner was about to make the ultimate sacrifice. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't." Bonner gave her a single solemn nod. "I have to. It's the only way. You keep going. You make sure the kids get home safe." There was no more time for arguments. The mission had reached its breaking point, and Bonner knew this was the moment. He turned and walked to the fighter bay, where his personal ship awaited him. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was clear. This was the end of the road, but he had no regrets. He had led his team with honor, and now it was time to finish what they had started. The ship's engines roared to life as Major Bonner piloted his lone fighter into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Council ships loomed large in the distance, their firepower overwhelming. But Bonner had one thing they didn't: the element of surprise. As he zoomed toward the enemy's core, he knew his mission was simple: distract them long enough for the rest of his team to escape with the children. His fighter darted through enemy fire, weaving and dodging with skill and precision. But despite his best efforts, the Council's ships were everywhere. He could see the massive warships targeting him, their guns trained on his ship. With each passing second, his chances of survival grew slimmer. Still, he pressed on. He had made peace with his decision. This was the only way to ensure victory for his team. As he broke through the perimeter of the fleet, the enemy's weapons rained down upon him. His fighter shook violently under the barrage, but he remained focused, driving it deeper into the heart of the fleet. Bonner's ship crashed into the midst of the enemy, causing a massive explosion that rocked the entire fleet. The shockwaves from the blast sent enemy ships spiraling out of control, their systems fried by the force of the blast. It was a spectacular, selfless act. Major Bonner's sacrifice had given his team the time they needed. The rest of the fleet, battered but determined, made their escape, the children safe and sound aboard their ships. They didn't have time to mourn Bonner's loss. The fight wasn't over yet, and they had to get back to Earth. As the final shots were fired at the Council's homeworld, the view from space was nothing short of catastrophic. The planet, once a beacon of the Council's power and prosperity, was now in ruins. The capital city, which had stood proudly for centuries, was reduced to rubble. Fires burned across the surface, and entire sections of the planet were nothing more than smoldering remains. It was a symbol of the Council's collapse, their civilization torn apart by the very force they had underestimated. But amidst the destruction, there was a sense of closure. The humans had done what they set out to do. They had struck at the heart of the Council and brought their reign to an end. The message was loud and clear. Never again would humanity allow themselves to be oppressed. The Council had learned, in the harshest way possible, that the spirit of humanity could not be broken. As the human fleet made its way back to Earth, there was a heavy silence. The team was physically and emotionally drained, but there was a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. They had faced insurmountable odds, fought against an enemy far more powerful than they were, and emerged victorious. The children they had rescued would now be free, able to return to their families, and live a life without fear. But the cost had been steep. Major Bonner's sacrifice weighed heavily on them all. Back on Earth, the team was greeted as heroes, but there was no celebration. The return was somber, filled with the quiet respect and grief of those who had lost so much. The children, safe and sound, were reunited with their families, but the faces of the soldiers told a different story. They had lost comrades, and they had lost a leader. Major Bonner's name was now etched in the annals of history, but it was a name spoken with reverence and sorrow. A memorial was built in his honor, a place where his sacrifice could be remembered. The camera lingered on the stone, where his name was engraved, a testament to the man who had given everything for the future of humanity. His face, though gone, would live on in the hearts of those who had fought alongside him. His legacy would be remembered for generations to come. The final scenes showed the human military fleet, now stronger than ever, standing tall and united. They were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson that day. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had faced their greatest enemy, and they had emerged victorious. The message was clear: humanity would never back down. They had proven that, no matter the odds, they would always fight for what was right. And so, as the camera pulled back, showing the strength of Earth's forces, a new era began. One where the humans stood tall, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them. The war was over, but the journey had only just begun. The future was theirs to shape.